All right. Hello, peeps, and welcome to the Culture and People cast. Today we have Tegan Trovato on the episode. And guys, I have had a mind crush on her for a long time. She partners with another dear friend and collaborator of mine. And I'm so excited to give you guys exposure to her. So Tegan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for that lovely intro.
Cool.
Yeah.
In a few sentences, would you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yep. I'm Tegan Trovato. I'm the founder of Bright Arrow. We're an executive coaching and leadership development firm. And along with our coaches and we offer team development, executive coaching, and well, I already said team development. Those are the main focus areas.
Development and executive coaching. And guys, you should check out Tegan's stuff. So are you still doing your podcast with Katie?
We are. We've been on a bit of a hiatus for obvious reasons. Katie is now home with 2 children full time. I think you might know something about this.
Yeah.
Playing teacher. So we've had a bit of a pause, but we will resume very soon.
Awesome. So I just appreciate your thought leadership in the area of people and culture and the work you're doing. So for you, what is your favorite thing about influencing this people and culture space?
That's such a good question. There are a lot of things I like about it. And I think what I'm really feeling in this time is that this is sacred work.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we can check boxes, we can talk values, we can talk incentive programs, but at the end of the day, it's sacred human work. I mean, we're talking about people coming to work to find purpose, to create meaning, to feel belonging. And those are not light, fluffy things.
No. And they take intention.
They do.
Right? So when these orgs, I think, reach out to people like us and they're like, oh, could you help us? We've got a little maybe performance issue, or we want to evolve our culture, right, to the positive. There's no silver bullet, right? This is very intentional, consistent work.
Yes,
right?
It's
like
should
a
be.
Relationship with a partner. It should be, right? It should be.
It should be. So I think when we are invited to that space, it is a privilege and we should see it as such.
Yeah. And look, I grew up in the church. So when somebody says sacred, I'm like, I can feel that in my bones. And I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
right. This is sacred work, helping
It
people
is.
find meaning in their life. So
especially right now in the time we're in with COVID and social and political unrest, people are overtaxed by their work and also looking for respite in it. Because it is still a more predictable place for them to come. So it's an unusual time to be an employer and to be an employee. So
And suffering is happening. Suffering happens all the time because we're humans, but suffering is sort of this global experience right now, and holding space for that and encouraging that. It makes it even more challenging, I believe, to lead and engage. But I'm hearing from leaders, engagement is a challenge. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Engagement's always a challenge. We know this keeps Gallup in business, right? Thank you, Gallup. You can keep telling us how unengaged our workforce continues to be. And eventually, hopefully we will really get it. And many organizations are really working on it, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
I think, again, I'm going to give a nuanced answer, which is different from the answer I would have given a year ago about engagement. And that is that I say, based on the leaders I'm talking to, that people are overly engaged right now.
Okay.
So we may not be engaged in the things that we traditionally are, and we may not even have our employees engaged in the way we want them to be, but we are overly engaged, right? So we have parents at home with their children. I have yet, unfortunately, to hear of an employer who has pulled back their initiatives or trimmed back their projects. No one has stopped pouring gas on the usual fire that are the expectations of work. So I think people are getting cooked. I don't think there's another way to say it. So during this time, the way I think of engagement is that there are populations within our employee groups who need special engagement and special attention. And I think of our entry-level employees who are just deeply fearful of losing their jobs because they're just keeping the roof over their heads. There are plenty of employees in every organization that fit that bill. I think another group that needs special engagement is women. I mean, it was at October, we lost 850,000 women from the workforce in 1 month. 1 month. I don't even know what's happened. I don't know what the numbers are since then, but let's face it, they didn't just drop in November the following month, right? So I really would call employers to action right now and call leaders to action to really think about how do we engage are women employees and women leaders. And even if they're not women, we know the primary caregivers in their family,
Yes.
whatever gender they identify with.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take better care. What do they need? And give that to them. They
Right.
will remember that later, and they will evangelize your employer brand over that.
Agree.
Yeah. So I think that's where I am on engagement right now. It's a real different time.
Yes, yes. And I think hoping that the normal percentage, which I believe Gallup, 35% of our workforce is engaged. So just a little over a third means that 2/3 on normal times. Right. So I just think we have to have realistic expectations of humanity in the workplace right
Yes.
now.
Thank you.
Working parents, 40% of our workforce, right?
Yeah.
So you address the caregivers, the women, those earlier in their career.
Yeah.
That group, that early level group is reporting the same amount of loneliness that baby boomers or retirees are right now.
Yeah.
We won't even talk about our middle group here, that where we are,
Right.
but like
Right.
those two groups. And I agree. I think we need to be very intentional about how do we divide this up? We can divide them into groups and thinking about how are we showing care and feeding differently than we were before.
Yes.
Differently than we were. I'm not saying more because I understand organizations and leaders are taxed, but we have to be thinking differently.
I totally agree.
Yeah, love it, Tegan. So can we get tactical? What is some
Sure.
advice, either for the leader or the employer, both? We can go wherever you want to go. A person out there who's listening to us who says like, yeah, I feel this like for my organization and I want my organization to get better. I want us to get better at people practices here.
Yeah.
What tactically could they do tomorrow to start that?
What I love is I'm a coach and I'm never allowed to give advice. Like it's really not our practice. So thanks for the invitation to give some advice. When I think about, first, let me preface this for listeners. I'm invited into rooms with senior leadership teams mainly, and it's not unusual that we're talking about culture in that room, or values or people strategy. I'm not a consultant in that space. I coach people through their process of designing these things, right? And thinking a little bit differently about them. But what I notice is that senior leadership teams get together and they make assumptions about what their culture is.
Yes.
Right. And it's understandable because they do have a true sense of the culture they most commonly operate in. It's not a fallacy what they believe. It's just that within their sphere of influence and operation, they have a different experience of the organization as the most senior leaders. So I'm very often reminding my teams and my leaders that they need to engage ideally an outside consultant that can come in and be the ear to the ground and inform the most senior leadership team of what the rest of the company believes the culture to be.
Yes.
And that is our starting point if we're going to do this well. Then ideally, again, working with an expert in the space like yourself to design the aspirational view of culture and values and and then you get to the middle, which is how do we go from where we are to where we aspire to be. And I really, again, I want to emphasize, I think that having an outside partner who is educated on and qualified to do this work that can help you do it quickly is integral. Having a coach to help you stay accountable to those changes and help you live those culture pieces is important as a leader because it really does start there. We're going to model that behavior. So I think that's one. I have a second one, but I want to pause there for you because this is such your realm of expertise and just see if you have any thoughts or reactions to that.
I think it's great. I mean, we do have to start with asking and then please listen, right? And I want you guys to set realistic expectations for your people that thank you for your opinion. I am not sure I'm going to be able to pull all that off. Right. But I want to do everything I can to listen to the trends in our employee group and put things into action. Right. So we're setting realistic expectations. They don't want to leave that conversation thinking we're going to like solve their 10 biggest problems that they just listed.
That's right.
But we want to set realistic expectations. And then we do need to seek help because I have seen I was inside organizations for 20 years doing this work and outside on my own for 5. And I have seen organization just try and stumble. And we will all stumble. Even if you hired me, we'll stumble, but we'll stumble together. And an expert can bring in those best practices, the research, right? Scientifically proven when we do this, this is most likely to happen.
That's right.
And
Useful.
Organizations like to think they're very different, and I understand they have their uniqueness,
Mm-hmm.
but what we all have in common is that we employ humans.
That's
And there
right.
are some really true things about humans that we could be doing, right? One of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
books I'm reading right now by two researchers at University of Michigan, Compassionate Work.
Mm.
Oh, it's just I can't even highlight because I would just highlight
Write
every
that
book.
down. Thank you. I
I will
haven't
put it
heard
in
that
the
one.
show notes, guys, because I can't remember their names right now. It's two female researchers from the University of Michigan. I will link it in the show notes. But it is so true about having to lead with this compassion in
Mm-hmm.
order. If we don't do that, we won't get the results out of the humanity that we
That's
need.
right. That's right. And I love the point you make about the key step. This is a key step. And this is for any change management approach we have in organizations. It is to say what we heard. So to share it back to the population that told
Yeah.
us, here's what we heard you say. Thank you. So gratitude, no arguing with what was said, just take it. And then here's the roadmap. We can't, to your point, we can't do all 10
Yes.
things, but here are the 2 things we're going to tackle. And please be careful not to say, here's the 2 most important things. That may not be true for everyone. It's as simple as saying, here's the 2 things we're going to tackle first, and here's the roadmap for the others.
Yeah.
And then I think tactically also making sure it's not a top-down exercise, having internal committees that are comprised of a mix
Yes.
of employee populations is super important. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
I'm
could
a
go
big
on and on,
believer.
right?
Oh, I know we could. And I always tell people, look, the easiest thing for me, I've done a lot of work and I'm certified in ADCAR for ProSci.
Mhm.
And I think that acronym, you need to be thinking about your groups and divide them in working parents, right? New to
Mhm.
their career, maybe near retirement. And where are they? How do we build awareness on the change we're trying to create?
Yeah.
How do we create desire? How do we
Yeah.
build the knowledge on how we're actually going to do that? Right.
Mhm.
Then we create abilities. Then we
Love
train,
it.
train, train. That's when training
Love
comes
it.
in, all
Yeah.
that work. And that's when
Then
the
training.
training
Mhm.
comes
Mhm.
in, right?
Mhm.
And then this is the key, the reinforcement. This is a constant process, and everybody within our organization might be at a different spot, but it takes that intentionality. So as much as I want them to bring in experts because this is really important work, I do want them to value their HR and their organizational development teams.
Oh, of course.
This is your internal
Ideally, they're
army
in
for change.
Yeah, ideally they're in partnership with the
Ooh,
consultant and
right.
leading, co-facilitating and co-leading. We definitely want HR propped up through that process. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was very
Yeah.
negligent that I did not, and I think that's very important.
No, I think
No,
people like
yeah.
you and I assume that's so
Yeah.
important, but I've been brought into a lot of organizations who think hiring me is the key. And I'm thinking, why isn't your HR OD team here?
Mhm.
Right. And they're like, well, they haven't been able to accomplish it. Right. Or they're
Right.
busy with other things.
Mhm.
This is the most important thing you're telling me, right? I want to
Mhm.
partner with them. And by the way, partner with them so that when I leave, it
Mhm.
doesn't crumble, that your
Yeah.
investment of time and money wasn't for nothing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Woo.
have one more
I love
tactical thing, and I'd
Please.
be remiss not to talk about teams. It's such a passion. I mean, half of our practice is teamwork, and there's a lot of science to teams now, and that didn't exist even 10 years ago. The level of science we're talking about now was not around, and so we are seeing a lot of change, catalyzed and catapulted through the culture work done through teams. And there's a framework I use. It's called the 6 team conditions. It was created by doctors Ruth Wageman, Richard Hackman, Aaron Lehman, and their colleagues at Harvard. So very distinguished group of professors and researchers. And the 6 conditions account for up to 80% of team effectiveness. So as a coach, when I first started doing teamwork, it was very relational, which I think is where a lot of coaches go. Like, how do we help you guys get along? How do we play nice in the sandbox? How do we do conflict? And those things have their place. I'm not at all denigrating those.
Totally.
However, what the science is showing us is that it does not help the team sustain change or actually deliver on their purpose. So 6 conditions are real team, right people, compelling purpose. And I'm talking about purpose for teams being the work that only they can do, not that their employees can do, not that their departments can do. What can that team do together? Then there's the sound structure, supportive context, and having some form of team coaching, even if that's by the leader,
Yes.
to help them carry the process through. So I would say to help pull up your culture and how you team, because that's where pockets of culture exist, grow, fall apart, etc. Hire a practitioner and that's an expert in the science of teaming, not just the relational piece, and
Right.
consider doing a team reset. So I mainly work with senior leadership teams. So CEOs have to decide, do I want them to be a reporting group, or do I want
Mhm.
them to actually operate as a team? And that's not an easy answer. There's a whole process to help them get there. You can do team resets anywhere in your organization, your IT department, any project teams you have.
Right. Right.
So I would consider, partnering with someone that can help analyze how well teams are functioning and then bring forward something real and tangible that will help
Mhm.
them move their work product forward and have a shared purpose.
Yes. Oh, I love those 6. I'm not as familiar
Mhm.
as you are, right? And I tend to look at organizations that like they hear me say, "Oh, I want to restore humanity into the workplace,"
Mhm.
right? And at
Mhm.
work in our workplaces, and they think, "Oh boy,
Yeah.
here we go with the hippie stuff." And I was raised by hippies. I love all that stuff, and
Uh,
I'm about the business, right? I want to help that business move forward by leveraging their talent better and differently,
yes.
while we take care of humanity, right?
Yes.
And we do that by
Beautiful.
looking at things like structure, right? How
Mhm.
are we structured? What are the processes we have in place, right? How are our people aligned to those processes and that
Mhm.
structure? And then how do we incorporate tools? So,
Create psychological safety, right? I mean, it can
right.
be laborious in the beginning to have to
Mhm.
set some of this up.
Mhm.
We make it fun. There are
Yeah.
ways to make it fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this level, as you described all of that. Some of it feels like headache, right? Like processes, structure. And then other part of me just relaxes and goes, I know what to expect when those things are in place. I know my role when those
Yep.
things are in place.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, it
It's like
creates
it's
comfort.
it's like saying the structure of the house they're building two doors down from me doesn't matter. Right? Just matters what furniture we're putting in there. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Ooh,
the
good
frame
comparison.
actually is very important, right? Like
Mhm.
they dug holes for weeks because there was a sinkhole in that area. They dug and dug and dug and dug, and then they filled in and filled in and filled in
Yeah.
just to be able to start to dig a new foundation.
Yeah.
That's really, really important because
Yeah.
our culture, guys, is the outcome of our daily habits and behaviors.
Mhm.
Daily habits and behaviors of our people and our leaders. So
Mhm.
that disconnect, let's go back to what you said at the beginning, Tegan. Like these leaders say like, oh, this is what our culture is, because that's what, like you, I've worked with so many senior leader teams. That's what they're experiencing. And when
Mhm.
I was inside organizations, it was my job to make sure I was pulling up the
Right.
information for them. Right.
Right.
Now they've got to be able to go through the organization, building those relationships, keeping their ear to the ground, and
Mhm.
then acting on some things, not all things, but some things that are really
Yes.
important. Yeah.
Yes.
Great tactical
Beautiful.
advice, Tegan. I really
Mhm.
appreciate that.
My pleasure.
I love everything that you shared today. You and I could geek out on this for hours.
Yes, we
And
could.
I I think really the point here, guys, that I want you to take away from Tegan is start somewhere,
Mhm.
right? Start somewhere and take action. It's the lack of action. Your culture is being defined somehow.
Mhm.
People are behaving daily in their
Mhm.
work. So your culture is being defined by that. You might as well be intentional and direct it direct it in a direction that feels really aligned with the purpose of the organization and the way you want to treat the humans that help you
Yeah.
accomplish your goals.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Thank you, Tegan, for today. Thank you for all you're doing for people and culture. I just truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. All right, guys, peace and progress. Enjoy the episode.